To chat with Randy when he comes on, say like, "Hello, Randy," or do you want to just introduce him and walk him up? Have a chat with him? Yeah, cool.
Okay, are we going to start? Okay. All right, people, let's get it started. Here I am. All right, let's get it started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World's Product Day 2022. Woohoo! So excited to see a lot of you here. I see a few faces that I've met in the previous meetups. Glad to have you back here. My name is Sima, and I will be your host today with my amazing friend Ben over there, and John, who's taking care of our YouTube channel right now. We are live on YouTube as well. So a little bit about myself. I work as a product manager at Microsoft. And today we're gonna talk about a lot of amazing stuff. But before that, I just want to give you a brief intro about what is ProductTank and Mind the Product. So Mind the Product is started 2010 in London, and over years it grew into 150,000 members. What we do is to organize meetups, events, conferences, and a lot of online resources that you can access through the website. ProductTank is a meetup that was born out of that community. It's a free event that is organized by volunteers like me. And we do it from product people for product people to bring everyone together to learn and share insights with each other. We are span over 200 plus cities around the globe, and you can come and join us and help us if you're interested. How you can do that is that you can come as a speaker, just talk to me or Ben, drop us a message. We would love to have you as a speakers. You can also host or sponsor future meetups. And then you can also write an article in mindtheproduct.com website. You could also become a member, as you are right now, and encourage your friends to join the community and grow it. Thank you so much to our amazing sponsor, Intercom, who, yes, who sponsored tonight's meetup with amazing stuff. So I'm just gonna.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I will just throw here very quickly, but well, first of all, welcome to Intercom. We are the customer engagement platform. We are very happy to, receive you guys here today. Thanks to, ProductTank to be here today as well. Feel free to grab pizza. There are fizzy drinks there, some alcoholic drinks there. We are around to help. And I'm one of, no videos, please. I'm one of the technical recruiters in Intercom. John there as well. So we are here to help. And if anyone would like to do some network and talk about roles, ping us. Okay, we're here to help. Have a nice event and thanks for coming.
All right, so tonight we are hosting two amazing speakers. Randy, who is a product leader and coach with more than 20 years of experience leading companies and product managers across different industries from retail, financial services, and even media. He has recently, I think it's been 2 years maybe, published a book, What Do We Do Now?, which is a product management guide to a strategy in the time of COVID, and all the profits is going to the COVID-19 community. He is also director and founder of the Out of the Owl, which is a consultancy for product management. He will talk about obstacles that we face when we want to grow teams and then build amazing product teams. And he's going to share his gems with us on how to overcome those obstacles. And our second speaker is Mark, who is actually a product manager at Intercom. And he is the founder of a edtech startup called My Study Pal. And I would like him to tell a little bit about himself when it's about his time. And he will talk about how to scale teams without breaking things, which I think would be very interesting for everyone. With that said, I'm gonna go to Randy, who's with us from UK. Hi, Randy.
Hello, I feel like I'm on Eurovision.
Lovely to have you here. I'm just gonna hand over to you and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Can you see my, yes, you can see my slides. Fantastic. So as Seema said, I'm going to talk about what's stopping you and your team and how to overcome it. A quick intro, you've already seen this. Yes, the book's out. The big secret about it is I wrote it at the beginning of the pandemic, so we thought it was a good idea to put COVID-19 in the subhead. Turns out it's not about COVID-19 at all. It's about what to do in a time of crisis, so it's pretty evergreen, and I need to change the title at some point. I also do the podcast for Mind the Product with my co-host Lily Smith. Please do listen to it. We talk to the best product people around every week and get them to tell us how to do our job and hopefully your job better as well. As Seema said, I do consulting as my day job. I work on all these things. You can see more at outofowls.com. I also run a regular chat. It's like this, but without the pizza and beer, but it's smaller and people can talk to each other. You can learn more about that at pita.social. Enough with that. Let's get on to everything. So we're talking about problems and obstacles. And a lot of times when we have these problems as product people, we feel like we're locked out of the room. We don't have permission to do the right thing. We're not getting the opportunity to do everything we want. And there's a lot of things that create that barrier between us and our team or ourselves being more successful. And I talked to people at one of the Product in the Ether sessions and asked them, what are the things that they feel like are holding them and their team back? And I got some interesting stuff. This is not authoritative. This is based on one session, but it's really representative of the things I hear from talking to people in general. So they told me about things like they spend all their time firefighting because there's too much debt, both product debt, things were built well, but the decisions were made that may not be relevant today, or tech debt. Things weren't built to scale. They weren't built to do what they need to be done. They talked about not having psychological safety. They were worried about their role in the commercials of the company. They were worried that there's no stakeholder alignment, that people are telling them to do lots of different things and people aren't aligned on their priorities. Or that there's no strategy, there's a lack of direction, or even worse, there's a strategy that they fundamentally don't believe in. And that can lead to sometimes to too much focus on short-term results and too many shortcuts taken. I'd love to have you all raise your hands and tell me how much of this sounds familiar. I'm guessing it's quite a lot of you, though. They also tell me that there's a lack of consistency, that we launch an MVP and then it's just on to the next half-done thing. They never feel like they're actually completing on their objectives. And then sometimes they're working with teams, and procurement, unfortunately, got name-checked quite a few times. I feel bad for poor procurement. but teams who have different goals and processes and potentially different timelines, and they feel like blockers rather than partners. So how do we deal with all of these things? Well, we're product people, so we go back and we use Venn diagrams, right? And the common product Venn for all of us is based on three things. It's customer, tech, and business. And we're awesome, so we're right in the middle of it. There's a problem with this Venn diagram, though. We've been using it for years, and it's really good, and it's really attractive. But there's a fundamental problem because we see ourselves right in that center, but so does everybody else. I guarantee you, your friends in marketing and in sales and in many other departments in general management all feel exactly the same thing. They're the ones who own the customer. They're the ones who own the relationship, and it's their responsibility to get things out. It's not just us. So how do we fix that problem? How do we deal with this and ultimately make both ourselves and our teams more successful? Well, like I said, the Venn is ultimately a really good tool, so let's use another Venn. And mine is going to have three things in it as well. It's got people, process, and prioritization. And because it's three things that all start with the letter P, it's officially a model. That's how it works. You can create your own models anytime you want. Alliteration is your friend. But the thing is, with this one, if you get everything right, things magically start working, and people don't fight about who owns the customer relationship because they're all working on it together. So let's talk about these three things. So start with people. There we go. And people is based on one simple question. Maybe not quite so simple a question, but we'll try. It's how do you know if you have the right people in the right roles and if they're any good? It's harder than we think. We can do it based on a test, and we do this in interviews all the time. We ask people a bunch of questions, and we prescribe what the right answers are. And this is what we lead to people going out on certified Scrum product owner courses and things like that. And I don't think this is what we're trying to test at all. I mean, sure, it'll give you an answer. It'll tell you if people have read up on things and they're aware of different techniques and ways of dealing with stuff. It won't necessarily tell you if they're delivering value, if they're achieving results. That's really the key thing. Everything else we do is just a proxy for how are we and our teams going to be better at helping our company and helping our customers, which should help our company, be more successful. So there's a few things if you're a manager. Let's talk about them first. So if you manage for other product managers or teams of product managers, I want you to do three things. Really, three key things. One is set clear expectations for everyone. Make sure people know what they have to do to be successful. And when that changes, make sure you communicate that. Part of that is talking to your team members, to the people that you manage and the people that work with them, their partners and their stakeholders. Make sure you're getting a full picture of things, not just what your product managers tell you, and not just what you see. But most importantly, listen to them. Spend time understanding what they're actually telling you and look for root causes. Listen to what they're saying and how they see the world. But it's not only on managers. You have to, if you're a product manager, or even if you're a manager of people, you have a manager yourself, you have to take control of things as well. So if you're a team member, for your manager, there's a few things you have to do as well. You have to make sure you know what you're being asked to do. Be really clear on this. It's not about what you think the problem is and what you want to solve. Know how that fits into the context and what other people's expectations are of you. Make sure that you're regularly talking to your manager and that they are listening to you, but also listen to them. Make sure you've got that communication going both ways. And if you're not sure about something, ask. It's your job to get clarity and manage your career. It's not somebody else's job to do it for you. There's one other part to this that I really want to touch on, and it's going to sound a little self-serving because I spend my time doing this. And it's not about working with me. I promise you that. It's not about even working with other coaches, but at least not professional coaches. But for everyone, it is really important that you get coached in some way. There is, in my experience, no better way to get better at your job than to work with a coach. And it doesn't have to be formal. You don't have to employ someone. You don't have to pay for it. Your manager can do this. Other managers can do this. You can even trade with a friend who's in a similar role to you and just coach each other. You can do it at things like ProductTank through social groups. Just make sure you're investing in yourself and in your relationships, and make sure that you have a safe space to talk about things, to explore things, and to have someone call you on your bullshit. And make sure that you have a way of looking at the world that isn't just stuck in your silo. One more piece to people, and that is about the team itself. If you've ever seen me talk, you've probably seen me do a similar slide to this in the past about what is a product team. But I'm going to repeat it because it's incredibly important. It's my favorite thing. The team is a group of people. Product team especially is a group of people that can do 4 things. They can ask a question, they can get an answer, they can understand and evaluate that answer, and they can take action based on that understanding. This has nothing to do with line management. It has nothing to do with JIRA tickets and stand-ups. It has to do with, do you have people in the boat with you that allow you to be successful? And there's a lot that's implied here. If you can do these 4 things, then you've got a good culture. You've got the permission and the understanding of the mission and the permission to do things about it. You know what to ask, and you know how to evaluate it. I mean, it's just a really good lens to look at if you have the right people and the right situation to be successful. If you don't, then make sure you're talking to your manager and to your stakeholders and say, this is what's holding us back. We can't do this. We can't be successful without these things. Please help us. Another thing that can get in the way is your process. How often do you evaluate them? Are the processes there to help you create value, or are they simply creating more bureaucracy and more process? You have to remember that all processes are terrible. The trick is to use them for what they're good at. They were created and implemented for a reason, because they were solving a problem or what somebody saw as a problem. And they can be amazing at that. But if you don't keep examining them in the same way you iterate and evaluate everything else in product, then they're just going to go stale. A nice illustrative example is my neighbors had some great pumpkins for Halloween last year. They were really nice. I liked them. I caught this a few days after Halloween, and they were still fit for purpose. You could put a candle in there, and they would have done a great job. A few days after that, they weren't looking so hot. They had started to lose their purpose. I mean, they still would have functioned. They would have done the job, but they wouldn't have done it well, and they're kind of starting to stink. And a few days after that, they couldn't do the job at all. They should have been tossed out and replaced. I mean, those neighbors are gone. Those pumpkins are long gone, but it's just a nice example. If your processes aren't doing the job that they need to do, if they aren't being regularly examined, they may go in the same direction as the pumpkins. Okay, so we've talked about process, we've talked about people, let's talk about prioritization. And this one should be easy for us, right? We do this all the time. We have tons of tools for it. And we do spend our time looking at backlogs and prioritizing things. But we need to make sure that's actually effective, that it's doing a decent job. So does everyone understand what needs to be done? Do they know what's not important and what should be stopped? Because I guarantee you, people are working on other stuff that people have decided that is no longer part of the strategy. And do you have an understanding of work in progress, the concept of work in progress, and what the capacity of your team is? I was working with a company a while back, and it got taken over. And the CEO and the senior management team flew over and sat us down in a room, and we were talking about what was going well, what wasn't. And some parts of the business were going great, but there was one part of the business for us that suffering a little bit. And we were trying to figure out, how are we going to move forward? What were we going to prioritize? What were we going to stop? How were we going to change the way that we worked? And the CEO leaned over and he said to all of us, problem here is that you're an or business. What you have to understand is that we are an and business. He expected us to be able to do everything when we weren't succeeding on doing one thing. And I've seen that play out so many times, and I'm sure you have before. You can be very bad at everything at once, or you can be good at doing something. You need to focus. It's just not going to work otherwise. But we saw the world differently. And I came back to my own van and realized there was a problem with this as well. Because I was looking at it, and so was the rest of the product team, and even our delivery team. We were looking at from within this circle. But the CEO, he was looking at from a different place. He was outside the circle, and all he saw is that things weren't working. So we had a perception problem. We viewed the world differently. And perception's a tricky one because, you can look at genius and say it's 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration, or you can be a little more prescriptive and say it's half consonants and half vowels. Another way of looking at this is just making sure you've got the right language, that you're speaking in the language that other people understand. If you don't speak in their language, they're just going to hear nonsense noises and ignore you. So make sure you talk to them the way they need to. And this stuff is scary. It's really hard. It's hard to do it well. So let's spend the remainder of our time talking about how to overcome this perception problem. This is actually the scariest part of everything. It's the hardest part of everything. So I'm going to talk about Batman. Batman's a product manager, and he's sad because he's trying to do things alone. And I've been sad Batman many times in my career, and I've coached sad Batman many times. I've heard people say this, and I've said it in my own coaching session so many times. It's 2 words. I can't. I can't make this happen. I can't convince a stakeholder. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I can't is horribly frustrating. And I'd love to tell you it's not true, but it is true. I can't do things. It happens all the time. But it's not about I can't. It's about how we work together with other people, because Superman can do things that Batman can't. And Batman can do things that Superman can't. And I know you all know this, but it needs to be something that you're reminded of from time to time. God knows I need to be reminded of it every once in a while. I may not be able to do something, but working with other people, we can overcome it. We can do things together. And it's really a basic message. It's moving from I can't to we can. And it sounds trite and it sounds stupid, but it's incredibly important, and it's incredibly difficult to do well, especially sometimes when you're stuck in a rut. So I'm going to give you a couple of techniques to get over that. One is from Emily Weber. She's got this whole idea of the team onion, and there's a link on this page, but I will send you can sign up, and I will send you all these links later on and the entire slide deck as well. So building your team onion is a really key thing, and it's just mapping out who are the core people on the team, who are your collaborators, and who are your supporters. And it's about getting the right people together, mapping out the rings, prioritizing your engagement with them, engaging with the wider team, and review and iterate. I mean, this is basic stuff that we do with our product development, but it's managing the relationships. One thing I like to throw on top of that is motivation mapping. So it's the same thing. Once you've identified who the participants are, make sure you really understand them. Make sure you know what their motivations are. What does success look like for them? What are their success metrics? What are their bonusable measures? What's on their scorecard? If you know that, and you know what they're trying to do, and you know how they're trying to work, then you can create a great relationship with them. And there's a secret to that one too as well. Julia Whitney has a great a great blog article, and again, we'll send you this link too, about her credit model, which is about finding what you have in common, reciprocating, generating empathy with other people, talking about the differences between what you're trying to do and the way you work, and being really upfront about it, because that's what helps you build trust. And other people talk about the trust bank and walking into a relationship with having it hopefully at least half full, and sometimes drawing on that trust, and sometimes charging up the trust bank and adding more credit to it. This stuff is incredibly important, and it's easily ignored because you get to spend all your time working with your dev team trying to solve problems. But it's all about creating that good environment, about creating the perception, that shared perception that things are going well, that you're all in it together, and that together you can overcome the stuff. So let's just review that one. How do you fix the perception problem? A few basic steps. You go back to basics as product people. get to know your stakeholders' motivations, do the research, do the discovery that we all know how to do, map it out, create your strategy, and execute on it. And like the process, don't let it go stale. Don't assume that because you checked in with someone a while back, that it's still valid, that they still feel the same way, that they still have the same perception. And let's dig into just a tiny bit more about how you get to know your stakeholders' motivations. I like to do this through using a formal process. I like to create an interview template and spend some real time thinking about what questions you should ask. And I'll send you my my sample template that I use whenever I start an engagement. But really think about what questions do you need to ask? What do you need to know from your stakeholders, from your boss, from other people that you're working with? And just like any other research, make sure you schedule your interviews. Do it quickly when you first start an engagement or when you notice there's a problem. Make it formal, make it really clear, about why you're having this meeting. It's not just coffee. It's not just a check-in. You're doing a formal interview. It's a different process. And be really explicit about that. And make sure you complete them. Completing them isn't just scheduling the interviews and having the conversation, because the definition of done for research is not doing the research. The definition of done is that you have gone back and looked at the research and you have understood it. You've done the synthesis and that you have shared your learnings. If you haven't done that, there's no point in doing the research in the first place. It's just a waste of time for everyone. So make sure you've done this. Go back to your stakeholders afterwards and tell them what you've learned and what you're going to do from it. Remember, if you can get them on your side, you're going to go from sad Batman to part of a team. And there's nothing that we can't do. Okay, that's a lie. There's plenty that we can't do. There's going to be plenty of things that get in your way still. But it's so much easier, and you will overcome so many of the barriers that are holding you back or holding your team back. And your team is going to be so much happier if some of those things get out of their way. So I promised I was going to send you that things. So you can sign up for that at outofowls.com/sucks. And I will send you an email that's got all the tools I referenced here. And I would love for you to stay in touch. I'm not going to stick around tonight because I didn't get any of the pizza or the beer or any of the fizzy drinks. I've got dinner waiting for me downstairs. I really want to see the other talk. So I'm going to come back and watch that on video later on. But do stay in touch at email, Twitter, or please do join one of our Products in the Ether events sometime in the future. Thank you all very much. I don't know if we're doing any questions at this point or if we're just moving on.
Thank you so much, Randy. I really loved all the examples, the pumpkin and the Batman. I could really relate to them. Amazing. I'm just going to open up for questions here before we move to Mark. Any questions for Randy? Thoughts, insights? I think, yeah, please.
Hi, Randy. Thanks for the talk. So just out of curiosity, like anytime you have faced like a product is failing and, like it's kind of very hard in order to make it successful, like 5% success rate or something, how do you reiterate those particular strategies in order to make sure like, it works? Is it like pivoting the whole model, or is it like making some changes in order to make sure like we are on the right track, or how do you do your strategizing in that part?
How do you fix a failing product? That's not one I can answer in just a minute or two. But I think with the respect to the stuff I was talking about earlier, I think the critical thing is making sure that everyone has the same goal for it, because people may not agree that a product is failing. They may not agree on the right way to fix it. They might not even agree that it should be fixed. Sometimes you want to replace it. Sometimes you want to do different things based on the product's maturity and its importance. The problem I've seen most often is that there is a product manager who is seeing a problem with their product and desperately wants investment in it. They know they can fix it. And if they fix it, maybe they can make what's called another $5 million. And that's fantastic. I mean, it's a no-brainer to do it. The problem is other people, usually people more senior or in the organization, have a different priority for investment because they see an opportunity for 50 million or 100 million. And people get really frustrated because it's such a no-brainer to fix that 5 million, but it's that, again, it's that shared perception thing. Make sure you understand what other people are seeing, that what you see is a shared priority, and that you're all working towards the same goal. If you're not, that's always going to be misery. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Super, thank you. Any other question?
Hi, Randy. I always hear this stuff that you should always repeat your strategy over and over again. I never assumed anyone remembers it, but every time someone says it, they never give you tactics on how to do that, with finesse. What will be your, the finesse part matters. So what would be your suggestion or tactics for someone trying to do this well?
I think this actually goes back to motivation mapping. Understand why other people are going to care about your strategy. It's not about repeating the same thing over and over again. It's making sure that they understand why it's important and how it will help them. So if you can communicate it that way, then they'll want to listen and they'll come back and repeat it as well. Anything you can do that's based on good storytelling. So understanding what they want to hear, what their success is, but also make it an interesting story. Show examples. Don't just say, our as you know, our OKRs are this, and we want to hit this number, therefore we will do this. That's boring. Find some way to make it interesting to them. And like I said, if it hits things that will also make their lives easier, then they're going to love it and they'll want you back.
Thank you.
All right. Any other question? Okay, then thank you so much, Randy. It was
Thank
really
you.
great having you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
And with that, I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to tell us how to move fast without breaking teams. Thank you.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? I got a thumbs up. Thank you, Louise. It's events like this that remind me how small Dublin is. There's 150 of you here, and I recognize at least 30% of you. Although our recruitment team definitely recognize way more of you. Hands up if you've had them in your DMs. Messing. So for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Mark, and I'm a product manager here at Intercom. And I'm here to talk about two things that we absolutely obsess about at Intercom. Moving quickly, but moving quickly in a way that doesn't harm your team's health. Now, often these two things can counteract each other. So how can we build, at speed in a way that doesn't harm team health? How can we have these two things in equilibrium? And I can see the GIF is really jumpy, but I swear it's funnier when it's in real time. But as PMs, we'd never jump into a solution without understanding the problem first, right? So what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? Well, think about a time that you were moving really, really quickly at speed, and everyone was really comfortable and content moving at that speed. Most of you're probably thinking about when you're working in a small team, likely an early stage startup. And as you scale, there's this gravitational pull to slow down. And unless you make deliberate efforts to fight against this, you're going to succumb to these forces. But the thing is that the gravitational pulls that slow big companies down are actually just the opposite of the forces that speed small companies up. So what are these forces? Well, you're working in a small startup. Everyone's bought into the mission and vision. They understand it. They can see the outcome to their output. They understand why they're there. Speed is cultural. Decisions are made quickly, and there's little to no process. People are also really personally invested with their own time, with their own capital. And you've got this Swiss Army knife team that can jump into each other's roles to get the most important things done quickly. And really importantly, everyone's looking out for each other. But some of these things don't scale very well, but some of them do. And that's the ones we're going to talk about this evening. So firstly, and most importantly, your company needs to have an enduring mission and a coherent strategy. And the questions you're trying to answer with your mission and strategy are, one, what are we doing? And secondly, why are we doing it? To win, you need to be focused. And as a team, you need to be hyper aligned, because people need to know what your company is and arguably more importantly, what it isn't. Intercom exists to make internet business personal. My former employer, Let's Get Checked, exists to empower people to live longer, happier lives. JetBlue exists to inspire humanity, both in the air and on the ground. Or in other words, we swear we won't pull you off our flight that we overbooked in a headlock. And you need to repeat this over and over again until people can literally recite your mission in their sleep. Now, your mission should be like the core of everything you do, but it's only one thing. Your mission needs to inform your company strategy. Your company strategy needs to inform your functional strategies, in our case, the product strategy. The product strategy needs to inform the program strategy when you're in a multi-product company like Intercom. And that program strategy needs to inform the feature strategy. And this is what this looks like at Intercom. We've got two main products, our Engage product, which is a marketing automation and digital adoption product. And we've got the support product that a lot of you probably know us for. And I'm the PM of email within the marketing automation product. And what I'm doing is when I'm creating my 3-4 year mission and vision or vision and strategy for outbound email, it can't conflict with anything that's above it. It's got to map exactly to the Engage strategy because the Engage strategy maps to the product strategy and so on and so forth. And the beauty of this is that anyone who's working on outbound email in Intercom can see exactly why what they're working on matters. They can map what they're doing right up to the company's mission. And the reason you need to do this is because the projects you're working on are inevitably going to fall off the happy path. You're going to come up against a blocker or some sort of unexpected complexity. And I promise you that things will begin to crumble unless people know exactly what they're doing and why it matters. Now, these things should rarely change. Your mission should only change every 5 to 10 years. Your strategy should not change every single year. You need to have a strategy that lasts multiple years because you cannot ask people to shoot if you're moving the goalposts. And answering these questions gives employees purpose. It gives them a clear idea of what the desired outcome is to their output. And doing this takes time. You've got a company like Intercom, it's got 1,000 employees. Getting everyone aligned on these things takes time. When you're a small company of 2 people, there's 1 connection. But as you grow, the number of connections in your company grows exponentially. When you get to 8 people, you're at 28 connections. By the time you get to 50, you're at 1,225. And you cannot drive alignment through word of mouth alone at this scale. You have to write it down. It has to be coherent, and it doesn't change regularly. And at Intercom, we really believe that for these really important strategic decisions, it's worth it to drive this alignment because crucially, misaligned people misalign others. And if you're in a company at the scale of 1,000 people like Intercom, you cannot afford to have misaligned people. It will create a toxic environment. So let's imagine we've got an amazing mission, we've got a really coherent strategy. Now we've got to break it down into really clear and tangible goals. And there's 2 main reasons why we want to have these really clear and tangible goals. Firstly, it allows teams to focus. And secondly, it allows them to anticipate blockers. And when you're smaller, you don't need to invest in these things. You can move fast, it's fine. But as you scale, it's worth taking the time to plan. And now, it's not sexy work. Like no one wants to do this. Engineers want to code, designers want to design, PMs want to pretend they know what they're talking about. But and because of that, it's work that can be bumped down the priority list. And when you're in the weeds, you're not thinking about this. But as a team, you've got to have your eyes on the horizon. You need to be thinking about what's coming in the next few weeks and months. You need to anticipate these blockers and plan accordingly, because planning is essential for your team to maintain consistent velocity. Because without it, the road ahead is going to populate with blockers. So what does effective planning look like? Well, everyone has to be aligned, first and foremost. And at Intercom, we achieved it through our principles. And we're really open about them. They're on our blog. They're part of our hiring process. They're part of onboarding. They're part of our DNA. They're part of our onboarding, and they're part of our DNA. And the beauty of principles is that everyone's interests are aligned. Engineering isn't judged by one thing and product another. We're united by our principles, and everything that we do is informed by them. Secondly, everyone has clear roles to play in the planning process. It's the role of the PM to define the roadmap, it's the role of the engineering manager to define the cycle goals, and it's the role of the individual engineers on the team to define their weekly goals. But the other role a PM plays here is to make sure that the team is ruthlessly focused, to make sure that the team isn't doing anything that's unimportant, even if it's really quick to do. Because if you allow this unimportant work to be done, you're sending the message that unimportant shit matters. And if possible, you should be focused on one thing and one thing only. This is a screenshot from my team's goals at the moment, and the only thing we care about is getting 5 customers using a new feature in a live email. Intercom's a multi-billion-dollar company. We've got hundreds of thousands of people who use the product every day. All we care about is 5 customers using this thing. We're ruthlessly focused. Everything else is secondary. And there's a really good quote from our co-founder, Des, that really hammers this point home. He says, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Now, let's imagine we've got this amazing mission. Everyone's broken it down into goals. They're set up for success. They're set up to move at speed. Now, speed has to be cultural. And like your principles, everyone needs to be bought into it. There needs to be absolutely no ambiguity in your company that speed is absolutely critical. And the reason for this is simple. When we say moving fast, we're not talking about doing the wrong shit quickly. We're talking about being super aligned as a team and executing with purpose against this coherent strategy. And for any physicists in the room, we're talking about velocity here. And velocity requires displacement. It requires this rapid execution. Because think about a company like a machine. If cogs are moving at different speeds, something is going to break. Everyone needs to be moving at the same speed. Think about it this way, right? If the road ahead of you looks like this, why would you bother speeding up? Because you're going to be slowed down ahead. And if you slow down, the person behind you is going to slow down. And then the person behind them is going to slow down. And you've lost momentum. But when teams are moving quickly in the same direction, you start to build momentum. It's a pain in the ass to get going. It takes ages. But once you have momentum, it's much, much easier to build more momentum. And the effect of momentum on a single team creates these positive feedback loops across the entire company. Let's imagine R&D is executing really, really well. They're executing against their strategy. They're differentiating faster than competitors can keep up. This makes sales' job easier. And because sales are now driving stronger revenue, there's more money for R&D headcount. And that means that we can differentiate even faster. There's these positive cycles that you create across the entire company. Momentum builds momentum. So next up is decision-making, everyone's favorite topic. And at the end of the day, building product is just a series of decisions, really. And as you scale, your company tends to evolve to include more people, more data in decision-making, because you want to make more coherent and rational decisions. But to an extent, this is natural. There's bigger stakes, there's less appetite for risk, but the downsides of this is really clear. But how many of you have been in this situation where you need Johnny to make a decision, but Johnny's on holidays? So you literally need to wait for Johnny to get back before you make the decision. And there's nothing more frustrating and nothing more momentum killing than waiting for a decision to be made. So how can teams make effective decisions? Well, the main reason that many managers want to get involved in decision making is because they're scared of stuff going wrong. But if you have these higher level things like your overall strategy and your team cycle goals approved, there's only so far wrong that a team can go. Every decision they make has to be justified against what's already approved. We firmly believe at Intercom that teams will be able to deliver quality product faster by not needing any approval on day-to-day executional decisions. Secondly, there should be no ambiguity about who's in charge of each decision. And at Intercom, we have this really, really clear DASI framework. Everyone knows who's the driver, who's the approver, who's, what does the C stand for? The contributor, and who's informed for every single decision. No, there's no ambiguity. And from there, the drivers are responsible for forming really strong opinions before they share it elsewhere. It's the driver's job to form the opinion, assess the pros and cons, and then share it. There's no point having these aimless discussions on 2-hour-long meetings. And decisions should be asynchronous by default. How many of you have been in these meetings where you're just going around in circles about some non-contentious issue? Asynchronous feedback is the fastest way to speed a team up. What else do I want to talk about? Nothing. And when you're giving this asynchronous feedback, it's really important that you follow some sort of shared convention, because not all comments are going to be created equal. So at Intercom, every single comment that goes on a doc has a prefix of either major, minor, or curious. Major means we're really misaligned here, there's some serious disagreement, and this thing blocks a decision being made. Minor is like, hey, you should consider this thing, but I don't feel strongly enough about it that I'm going to block the decision being made because of it. And curious is what it says on the tin. So what does this look like in practice? Well, this is a screenshot from a doc last week. It's a 6-month roadmap approval. And our VP of product, Brian, jumped in. He looked at what the PMs were proposing. He had some major feedback and he had some minor feedback. His minor feedback to me was like, hey, I just don't really understand your rationale here. Can you explain it to me? I explained it to him. And then he went, yeah, that's compelling. There's no need to discuss this any further. We're not going to sit in a meeting for 5 minutes talking about something that's not contentious. On the other hand, he's got some major feedback, some serious misalignment. We added that to the meeting agenda, and that's what we discussed. This means that unimportant, like non-contentious stuff does not delay meetings. It meant that in this big approval meeting of 20 people, it was only 45 minutes long. We approved 8 teams' roadmaps in 45 minutes by following this thing. The second last thing I'll say is decisions don't always have to be rational. Great innovation can often come from a completely irrational rationale. And there's projects ongoing at Intercom at the moment where the PM didn't have any customer feedback, they didn't have any churn reports, they didn't have any competitor insight to say, hey, we should do this thing. But it made sense because we're anticipating what people need, but it's still kind of a rational rationale. And this needs to be culturally accepted because what I just said, essentially, won't repeat it. The last thing I'll say is that it's really, really important to define what are the reversible and what are the irreversible decisions early, because you can get caught thinking about this thing that you can easily reverse and not spending the time on the things that are really, really fucking difficult to go back on. Spend your time on irreversible decisions and don't sweat the reversible ones. Next up is to be selfish when you're using process. And as you scale, process tends to creep in. Randy was talking about it. But often the result of process is that people get further away from what matters to them most. PMs are getting further away from customers. Engineers are getting further away from production. And this tweet kind of sums up why a lot of companies put process in place. It's to kind of just improve predictability, really, to try to prevent stuff going wrong. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is speed, autonomy, and creativity. And because you've reduced these things, you've really taken away teams' ability to shine and to really impress. And the major issue with process, though, is that many people put process in place to try to prevent something that happened once or twice, or even worse, they put process in place to proactively prevent something that might go wrong. And if you do this and follow this pattern of kind of codifying the antidote of shit that went wrong previously, you're going to end up with a process that looks something like this, right? And sure, it gets you from A to B, but it's complicated as fuck, and no one knows how it works or can explain why it's like that. And Jason Fried, the CEO of Basecamp, wrote about this back in 2016. And the example he gave was if Johnny walks into the office wearing shorts, you don't need a dress code, you just need to tell Johnny not to wear shorts again. And the kind of technical equivalent of that, because obviously Johnny didn't work in a tech company where shorts would be, culturally great. The kind of technical equivalent of this is let's imagine that Dave, the developer, ships something that's a few pixels off the designs. You don't need a new check mark before you merge every PORB saying checked with design. You just need to tell Dave to cop on. That's it. Process should be a guide. It's not gospel. You need to be able to bend your process when it doesn't make sense for whatever you're working on. So here's an example from a few weeks ago, if it'll load. So we shipped this MVP. We only shipped it to 10, 15 customers. It was super fucking scrappy. I wrote the outcome report. When I was writing the outcome report, there was these 4 major blockers to adoption for some of our really big MME customers. So we met as a team on the 4th of July, and we're like, hey, we need to do this thing to get people using it. And the outcome was yeah, we can do it next cycle. We can do it in 2 months' time. And in the meantime, one of our really tenured principal engineers was screw this, I'm just going to do it. A few hours later, he threw this PR in. It addressed 3 of the 4 of my, the biggest blockers. And I just went, if we just ship this thing and see what happens. One of the other PMs, Chris, jumped in and was like, I'm up for it. So we did it. We shipped it the next day to 20% of customers. We were like, what could possibly go wrong? And then 2 days later, we looked at the stats, and people were using this, and they were getting value from it. We're like, holy fuck. So we looked at the customer support conversations. There was only one inbound query being this makes no sense. So we changed the wording on a few things, and we shipped it to another 30% of customers. The results were the same. So we were like, well, we just shipped this to everyone. So we did. We shipped it to everyone. And the end result of this is that this value got in customers' hands in 8 days instead of 2 months. We saw Owen, our principal engineer, realize that the process did not work for what we were working on. He was able to bend it. It was completely culturally acceptable for Owen to do this. And it's okay for things to break. Sometimes things have to break for people to understand the problem and be bought into the solution. And as I mentioned, like proactive process rarely makes sense because you can't design the solution to a problem that you don't understand. The last thing I'll say on process is you've got to be executing on the edge of process. You should be really, really comfortable with the lack of process in your company. So doing these 5 things is what I believe is the most important thing to set your team up for success. If people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it and aren't blocked from doing it, oh, I've completely forgotten the last point. I'll pretend I didn't say that. So even if you do these 5 things, right, they're the main ingredients for your teams to move quickly. But even when you're doing the right thing, you still need to measure your team sentiment. Because if you don't measure your team sentiment, stuff can go wrong really, really quickly. Companies need to have a way of objectively measuring their team health so that they can identify bumps in the road before they manifest as mountains later on. Team health is a muscle. You build it over time, and if you stop training it, I promise that muscle is going to waste. And if it slips, you need to make deliberate efforts to get that team health back where it needs to be, because we've all been in those situations where team health starts to decline, and it becomes a really, really toxic environment really quickly. If this is something that starts to decline, you need to identify it and make deliberate actions to bring that team health back up to where it needs to be. So back to what I was about to say 2 minutes ago. To conclude, if you want to sustain speed over a sustained period of time, you need to have an enduring mission and a coherent strategy that everyone understands and they're bought into. When you have this, you need to break it down into tangible goals to stop teams getting blocked and killing your momentum. There needs to be a culture of speed in your company. Decisions need to be made quickly. Teams need to be empowered to make these non-contentious decisions themselves really, really quickly. It's okay for process to break. Sometimes you need to let things break to understand how to solve them. And then finally, you need to measure your team health regularly so that you can proactively identify these issues. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Mark from Intercom. Thanks for listening. Anyone got questions for me?
Hi. So I was just wondering, like, with all this process orientation, I guess, like, how do you decide, like, if something is like wrong, like the whole strategy is wrong itself, right? Like at Intercom, do you guys like follow some kind of metrics to kind of see, like, like this process is just not working out and it just has to be stopped, or how does that work?
Yeah, 2 things on this. So in a lot of companies, you're driven by data, right? It's a really, really quantitative culture. In Intercom, we have a really, really qualitative culture, number 1. So it's completely okay for me to say, I've no metrics to back this up, but it's my gut feel, it's my product sense. So on that screenshot, one of the things I blurred out in the end of Q4, I was like, I think we should do this thing. And they were like, why? And I was like, I don't know, it just feels right, okay? So coming back to how that relates to process is you need to have it has to be really okay for people to have really strong opinions, and it needs to be culturally acceptable for people to like tell you you're doing a bad job. I had a meeting today with someone who was way more senior than me, and the first question they were like to me was, they were like, be candid and tell me everything that's wrong with the job I'm doing. And I was able to be like, okay, well, I don't want to get fired, but here's 4 things that I think we should be doing. And that's completely culturally accepted. In fact, it was completely celebrated that I was being so candid with my feedback. So to answer your question, how do you know process is broken? It needs to be okay for people to speak up and be like, hey, this makes no sense. I think we should, think about it again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so.
Cool.
Yeah. Any more questions?
You mentioned just now that it's okay to do decisions based on gut feelings. I don't fully agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. I think maybe that moment when you have a gut feeling, wouldn't it be better just to call it out as, okay, maybe we should experiment with this and prove it that that makes sense to do it before investing in it?
Yeah, when I say gut feel, I kind of mean, I'm talking about like gut feel within those guardrails I was talking about. So the project I was talking about in Q4, we have these guardrails in place that say, hey, we want to go after these customers at this like segment. This is how we want them to buy Intercom. This is how we want them to expand with Intercom. And what I was able to say was like, hey, we have this project that we haven't tested, but it's completely aligned to everything above. So one, it's gut feel, but it's gut feel within guardrails. And the second thing I'll say is that, like, I'm not saying like we should set up a medical marijuana company in the morning. Everyone's gonna be like, absolutely not, right? It's guardrails. But the second thing I'll say is like, even though we're very, we don't like, yes, we use data, we absolutely use data, but it's not the number one and the only data point. But like, I think I'm up to like 60 or 70 customer interviews and I'm here 6 months. So it's a massive sample size on the qualitative side that even though we're not pointing to a metric on the dashboard and say like, if we do X, we know we're gonna get Y. I just thought you've built up that feel by sitting with customers and understanding what problem you need to solve for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with this because doesn't make sense to test everything, but you have to test the riskiest things. Right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If that's not risky, it's in the guardrail.
Yeah, and going back to the example I gave you there, the thing that we shipped, like that project is a quarter-long project, and the principal engineer who built it scoped it down to 1 week, and that's how we shipped it. So like, we de-risked that quarter-long project by doing something really small. What I'm talking about with gut feel is like these big strategic bets that like they just feel right, and that's why we need to do them.
Yeah, no, I got it. You answered the question basically. You have data to prove it, and the guardrail was okay, so you didn't go off track of what your goals were.
Cool.
And the other question that I had, you mentioned earlier that you can. It was kind of in line with this. I don't remember actually the word that you used. You said you can take decisions based on common sense. I think you used the word. I don't remember that. But my question here is, how do you avoid the cognitive bias of groupthink in that case?
Yeah, so this is a problem we had to solve recently in our team where we were trying to make design decisions, but there was 5 engineers in the room and the 5 engineers had different opinions. So coming back to what I said about strong opinions, it's the role of the driver, in this case, the designer, to form like a super strong opinion as to why they think that way. And then going back to that major, minor, curious, what we'll say in a lot of meetings is like, the only thing we're going to discuss in this meeting is major feedback. So unless you think that this shit is backwards, it doesn't matter. And like, we very much have a culture in Intercom of, yes, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it's completely acceptable to ignore feedback, even if it's coming from like on high. We can, like, we had this recently with roadmaps where someone was like, hey, I think you should look at this. And as a PM group, we were like, yeah, that definitely makes sense for this team and this team and this team and this team, but I think we're the odd ones out. So let's form rationale in our heads as to why we think we're the odd ones out, and we were able to push back on those things.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Mark, I wanted to just say that I really like what you said, because I think at the end of the day, it all goes back to the psychological safety, and then people can speak their mind and disagree with each other. That is the most takeaway for me out of this talk.
Oh, absolutely. We kill each other in meetings, and then at the end, we're like, we're all friends, and
that's
let's go to the bar for a pint.
I love it. Okay, any other question? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. It was really cool. About the processes. So in my company, I also try to keep them as simple as possible, but there is one negative side effect of it. So my team doubled within last year, and we have like a very super simple guide, and I have built a company of like a team of high context relationship. And the problem is it's very hard to onboard new people because they come and okay, they do something and somebody says, oh, we do things differently and we do this thing differently. And they always ask, why didn't you write it down? Because you have a one-pager like product manager guide, how to start. And how do you find this balance between like written down stuff and written down stuff? Because especially in remote companies, it's a challenge to onboard people, like assuming they get everything right away without having a bunch of calls.
Yeah, this is a meaty topic. I could do a whole talk on this one. couple of things here. Firstly is you need to invest really, really heavily in your onboarding process for your employees. Like just as if you're a PM, it makes sense to invest really heavily in onboarding because that's what every single customer is going to go through. Same thing for employee management. Everyone's going to go through onboarding, and you've got to give people the time and space to settle into a company and let them understand why you do what you do. So for example, my first week in Intercom, I didn't meet my team. I didn't go to stand up. I was just given 20 documents to read and told come back with like all the questions you have on these things. And so I was given the headspace to, you know, really think about these things. The second thing is that I can say this hand on heart, there's no ego decision making in Intercom. Like I've never been in the situation where there's a decision being made or a process put in place that I go like, that makes no fucking sense, right? So when a process works and people are bought into it, it's really difficult for, you know, Mr. Big Company to come in and be like, I'm going to do it the way I did it in big billion-dollar company over there, because everyone's going to be like, fuck off. This works for us, right? So it comes back to having people aligned and having them, you know, having a process that makes sense, having people that are able to, you know, having individual teams that are able to tweak this process for them. Because if you're Mr. Big Company and no one agrees with you that this process should change, you're not going to be able to change it. But you raised an interesting topic about like in a rapidly growing company, how do you kind of keep everyone aligned? Like I was in Let's Get Checked with Molly and Frank, and I was about employee number 200. When I left, I was employee 800. And that was in an 18-month time period. It's like rapid change. And we did loads of things really right, and we did some things not so right. But you've got to take the time to write this stuff down. It's really tempting when you're in the weeds of projects to be like, oh, we'll get to that, or, you know, we'll do this onboarding by word of mouth. Intercom's lucky, you know, it's grown up slowly over 10, 12 years at this stage that we've had the time to write this stuff down. But when you're in those smaller companies, you've got to take the time to write stuff down. Because in Let's Get Checked, when people wrote stuff down, it made sense, and that was the force multiplier. I hope I've answered the question.
Empower teams. That's all it takes.
TLDR.
All right. Any other question? Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Amazing presentation. So can you give me some example how to measure the team sentiment? And how do you train your team to do the things fast?
Yeah, I'll take this in two parts. You need to measure team sentiment over a short term, a medium term, and a long term. So short term, everyone does a weekly retro. It's part of Agile. No one needs to talk about retro. You all get it. What we do in Intercom is we have a framework. It's actually on the blog called High Performance Teams. So every 6 weeks, a team sits down and they're measured against the 5 or 6 criteria that we believe matter most. I'm going to forget some, just a warning. It's like trust and growth. Like, do the team trust each other? Are we moving at speed? Are we delivering customer impact? Are we shipping customer value? And a couple of other things I can't remember. And we measure those things as either strong, okay, or struggling. So what we can do as a team is we can track these things cycle to cycle. We work in 6-week cycles in Intercom, think of them as like 6-week sprints. So if we're seeing like, hey, our speed's gone from strong to struggling to, you know, really, or strong to okay to struggling in the last 6 months, we can identify these things and really dig in. Why is this happening? That's on the R&D side. On the kind of company side, in Intercom, we have a monthly pulse survey. Everyone gets a survey once a month. It's got one question. It's something like, would you recommend Intercom to a friend? And obviously you can track like month to month, is stuff going wrong there, and the HR team can action feedback from there. And then we also have an annual company survey, which is like 20 minutes long, where people are talking from everything to like, you know, the lunch was shit yesterday to like, I think the CEO is really bad at her job, which she absolutely is, and Karen is amazing. But and that's how you're able to track these things on like an ongoing basis. So you can identify these things really early, so that when you do these annual surveys, you're not going to be like, why did that happen? I've completely forgotten the second part of your question.
Thank you. How do you train your team to be fast?
Another thing I could probably talk about for 20 minutes. How do I sum this up in 2 minutes? It's cultural. I have fights with my team as to why we need to ship things, like should we ship things or not? And it comes back to our principles. So I'll give you an example, and fight's a strong word, debates. Like 2 weeks ago, we had a new feature. It's a multi-quarter project that we've been working on. And we were saying like, hey, should we ship this thing? We were supposed to ship it on the 4th of July. No relevance to the other project that was on the 4th of July. And myself and my designer were uncomfortable. We were like, oh, I don't think we're there yet. And it comes back to our principles, right? One of our principles is ship early, ship often, and ship to learn. And in the description of that principle, it talks about like you should ship as soon as you have a coherent scope. And like this talks about everyone being aligned on principles. When we were having these debates with the engineers of should we ship or should we not ship, we were completely focused on that word coherent. We were like, in all these usability tests we've done, have we achieved a coherent scope? Can people achieve the jobs that they want to do through this product? Can we change the customer behavior that we're trying to change through this product? And when we kind of thought about that, we were like, nah, we need to give it another 2 weeks. So it comes back to answer your question of how do you train people, it has to be cultural, it has to be in your principles and across all levels of the organization. It just has to be accepted that speed is absolutely critical. And if you don't want to be on this boat, respectfully get off it. And like, we move quick at Intercom, but we move within guardrails. Everyone's really comfortable. We're not, we're not a big company of burnt out employees. Like people are really, really happy here. Like I think I've been here 6 months and I think 4 people I know have left. Like that's nuts, right? So it, it just has to be cultural to sum up the answer to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know there are 2 questions over there.
It's like a little interrogation.
Thanks very much. That was great. I'm wondering about your move from Let's Get Checked, which obviously grew up very, very quickly and probably had less of the scaffolding in place. When you came to Intercom, were you surprised by anything or anything stand out as, Jesus, I didn't know things were done this way? Like, was there a shock when you got in and how was it different to your previous place?
Ooh, that's a good one. Intercom, it's really difficult to compare, right? Because I was there when Let's Get Checked was scrappy and Intercom was absolutely scrappy when it was at the same stage of Let's Get Checked. Like I heard a rumor that there actually used to be a website called isintercomdown.com. I don't know if that's true or not, but like that's how scrappy Intercom was back in the day. And obviously we've got to grow up and now we get to say impressive shit. But did anything really surprise me? We have this like absolute never changing mission. It's the mission since day one, and the strategy, it's a much slower moving industry. So we're able to think about like, what does marketing automation look like in 3 years? What does digital adoption look like in 3 years? Whereas Let's Get Checked was really dynamic. Prime example, COVID antigen testing, right? So on like a Monday morning, Biden comes out and goes, hey, if you want to get into federal buildings, you need to be vaccinated or you need to have an antigen test. And like that, there was like this multi-$100 million market created out of nothing, right? Whereas like, there isn't going to be a new like $7 billion marketing automation market in the morning for Intercom. So what I loved about Intercom was like, these things didn't change, and obviously there's been like, we should really focus on this quarter, or we should focus on that in like H1 of next year. But like ultimately our Horizon 1 strategy goals and our Horizon 2 strategy goals remain absolutely constant. And that means that, as a PM, I'm constantly thinking about those things. It's the only thing I can think about. When I'm thinking about like, what does our email product look like in 3 years? I can make those decisions confidently because I know that our goals are going to be the same in 3 years' time as they are now. And that's not like shitting on Let's Get Checked at all. Intercom was the exact same when it was at Let's Get Checked stage. And like, there's absolutely no way you can scale companies that quickly and have everything be absolutely perfect. It's just Intercom, I'm in it at a completely different stage than when I was at Let's Get Checked.
Super. And there was one more question.
Yeah, thanks. Great talk. I'm at a company that is like at a similar size and I think has a very similar culture. And one of the things that you mentioned jumped out at me around like, I think you used like reversible or irreversible, like a 2-way door decision versus like a 1-way door, right? Like, and I think judging by some of the questions from other people as well, like if you don't come from a culture that has that like high level of empowerment and that focus on speed and that like willingness to make mistakes, it can be really challenging to know the difference between a reversible or an irreversible decision. How do you, and maybe the answer is just culture, but like, how do you help folks, or how does Intercom help folks like be smart about those decisions and feel confident in taking that step?
For all the other questions, I was like, I know these 3 things that I'm going to talk about. And for you, I'm like, fuck, it's like monkey with symbols in my head right now. Can you repeat the last bit of the question again to give me 10 more seconds to think about what you're going to say while I pretend I know exactly what I'm talking about?
Yep. No, I'm asking because I don't know the answer, so it's totally fine. the question, the TLDR is like, how do you help people know which decisions are reversible and which are not, and how do you help them feel comfortable making that call?
I still have monkey with symbols in my head. Let me try take a crack at this. I would say it's common sense to some degree. It's like, if we go this way, we're going to have this massive mound of product debt and UX debt, or we can go this way and it makes more sense, and these are the reasons why. I'm not really sure there's like a really clear, like, these are the 3 things you should do to make decisions be clearly reversible or irreversible. That's a really shit answer, but the honest answer is I have no fucking idea.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't either. So I think the answer is like, have good product sense. So yeah, that's fair. Thanks.
Sorry.
Right. Any other question? I guess.
So you've been here about 6 months?
6 months and like 4 days, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more about your experience here.
That's like an interview question, yeah.
The rumor is that before I joined, there used to be 3 types of eggs for breakfast, and now there's only fruit and bagels. So, you know. Do we? Yeah, sorry, what was the question again? I actually, I got really taken aback by the fact we have boiled eggs, which I didn't know about. It was something about my first 6 months. Yeah. It's a really phenomenal company to work for, and I'm not saying that because I was made wear this t-shirt and like it's being recorded and I know that like C-suite are going to watch this in the morning. It's a phenomenal company to work for. As a PM, you have complete autonomy over your team. And I know most companies come out and be like, if you're the PM, you're the CEO of the product. And that's bullshit. I'm not the CEO of the product here. I still have guardrails, right? But I'm allowed to have an opinion, and I'm allowed to think about like, hey, what makes sense here, and kind of go with gut feel. The second thing is I don't need to write tickets. PMs don't write tickets at Intercom. There's no such thing as tickets in Intercom. We don't have Jira, we don't have Trello. What happens is the designer designs a Figma file and they like put little anecdotes like, this is the interaction design, and they give it to the engineers, and the engineers go, I'll make a few judgment calls here as to what makes sense. We don't hire software engineers, we hire product engineers. It's the same thing, but the software engineers are like incredibly product focused. And that's something that really took me aback, because I was in like month 4 or something, and I was tasked with writing our FY24 outbound email vision and strategy. I was like, holy fuck, this is a big task. And then I sent around the draft to the team, and we had these engineers being like, this makes no fucking sense. And I was like, you're an engineer. But like, it's just completely refined for everyone to be in each other's gardens. And that takes a while to get used to, but it makes you so much better at your job, because everyone challenges you, but they challenge you in the right ways, like I talked about. And it just helps you build that muscle. You get really, really good at forming really strong opinions quickly. So yeah, lunch is really good. Breakfast isn't that, it's like, but lunch is really good. And there's a bar. So you get to like have drinks after work and no one judges you for it. It's phenomenal. Yeah, TLDR, great place to work.
All right, I think if no more question, Mark, you've been answering questions for the past 30 minutes, I guess. Lovely, and I think with that we come to the end of today's. Thanks a lot to our amazing sponsor Intercom, and our fantastic speakers, and you guys who came and made this event so amazing. Thank you so much.